came in about a trade secret, and the question came in last 2 weeks ago, actually, that we, or I guess is it every other week that we do this, or no, once a month, about the Google v. Oracle decision and the use of APIs as fair use. And we are still hoping to have an expert come and talk with us next month about that decision and some of the implications. But essentially, the Supreme Court said we don't have to get into whether or not you can um, get a patent on this, or whether or not you can actually copyright API code, because we're going to jump right to the fact that it's fair use to use it in these circumstances. And so we expect that there'll be a lot of commentary about this and what its implications are for software developers. We're looking forward to putting together some research on different ways that computer-based innovations are best protected. And we have even a grant, a small grant for some computer science students this summer to work with us on that. So if you have specific questions about the best way to protect certain types of computer-based applications, we'd love to have them. And with regard to the trade secret question, hi, Scott. You know, I think the Inquirer was right that once it's out of the bag, your remedy is to hopefully get damages in a lawsuit. But yeah, that once um, it's out, and that's why you're seeking damages in the court proceeding. So Romy, it's nice to see you. I thought you also were live, but you also have a picture that's realistic looking. So
Yeah, sorry, I just have I have something I'm trying to take care of while I'm listening in, and then I'm gonna join you in like 2 minutes. But
oh
yeah,
no, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I just I does anyone have questions? We we love to get the questions. We love to get them in advance so we can be sure that we have the best information that we can get for you pulled together. Um,
so since no one else is asking, I mean, the reason why I am here is I've been meaning to get in touch with you guys. So I talked with you previously about IP issues, and I'm just wondering if you're available for other issues as well. So we're just getting started on a bunch of pilots, and so trying to work out those agreements. And that's going to be going on over the summer. I'm just wondering if you guys might be able to help with that.
You're piloting products?
Yeah, so we have, we met before, but I don't expect you to remember what we've been doing. But
I remember you, yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay, good. So we have a thin film that gets cold without any additional energy input, and we're going to be piloting it on refrigerated trailers, but also possibly, so I just set up, or I'm in the process of potentially setting up one with Con Ed to do some testing on solar panels also. But this summer, we're going to be doing at least Wegmans trucks, and then maybe GNC Foods, maybe Cornell Dairy, which is kind of the closest to doing it at home. But then we also have a bunch of international pilots that, and these are what we're working out contracts with right now, because those are through a program called Tech Emerge, which is it's a World Bank. Sorry, my dogs, but hold on. So World Bank. Hey, hush, hush, Come on.
My dog's starting to growl.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, she loves to bark at anything moving if she can see it. You know, if the door is left open so that she can see what's outside, she'll bark at it. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. Okay, so World Bank program, where they're sponsoring these grants that support pilots for cooling technologies, companies that have cutting edge cooling technologies, with partnering with companies that are actively looking for cooling solutions, new cooling solutions. So it's kind of the ideal for us.
Right. You want to find out if, last time we talked, I thought you had some IP in the works.
Yes, we filed USPTO and with 11 countries otherwise.
Right. So what are your questions about that? Because you filed, so you're okay about.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and I didn't really pursue it so much because I was thinking of you guys more as IP focused at the time. So but I'm right now, yeah, I mean, we have a lawyer who's doing all that stuff, the IP stuff. But yeah, I don't really have, you know, a lawyer that's working on this other stuff. And I don't
Take referrals, but we're not a substitute for law firms. We're really a research group. And I understand probably you're wondering about agreements to protect your IP, agreements for maybe different fields of use, all the other things that go into agreements about, you know, what happens if there's an issue and how they'll get resolved, and maybe the scope of the agreement, stuff like that. And we do have a guidebook on licensing. Is that what you're thinking of doing, licensing out your technology for people to test it, or
No, we'll be selling the materials. So
selling? Okay.
yeah. So I guess the IP part of that would be, I mean, we have NDAs that we've used with other people previously. So I mean, it'd be
Right.
a separate
You
document.
wouldn't be doing an NDA if you're selling it though, right?
Well, I mean, we're doing a pilot, so if the way that we're structuring the pilots is like we'll if we're defining what a successful pilot will be, and what happens when there's a successful pilot, that will result in sales. But the early part of this negotiation stuff of the pilots and stuff, we do NDAs with them.
Okay, but since you filed the USPTO, you filed an application, you should be fine.
Yeah. So I really was getting in touch less for I hear you. You're really more like research and that sort of thing. I was thinking that you might have like clinic like services that you do through your program, but because I've always seen you as like the IP research, you know, sort of more like IP landscape, you know, research for your technologies kind of thing. But I think somebody else told me, oh yeah, they do all kinds of, you know, all types of works. I don't know.
Yeah, we do have a community development clinic that does trademark work. I don't know if they do any licensing work, but I could send you that information. Her name's Jessica Murray.
But I don't really want to do licensing. I want to just have like these. Basically, we have pilot agreements that we're putting together with these people. So it's more like, you know,
issues that you should be thinking of and that you want to make sure are covered and all of that. Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, that gets in a little bit into legal advice because you have those agreements for the worst case scenario, that if something does go wrong,
Yeah, yeah,
so you really, I mean, we would recommend that you get somebody. There's a startup group in Syracuse that we recommend sometimes, but you probably can get referrals as well. Um, So,
yeah. I mean, if you have any recommendations, let me know, and I'll be shopping around. I think
okay,
I can find a a community organization who can lend
okay.
assistance, but yeah, otherwise we'll probably have to find some money for doing that.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that I've always thought would be great if we could have a checklist. Also, it's hard to explain, but you really can't have people practicing law. And that's why we always have to keep this divider kind of
Mhm.
strictly.
Yeah,
But still, it's great for students to understand that IP is the beginning of the journey and that all these agreements that come afterwards are a sign of success and that it's great for them to be aware of the different questions people have. But right now we don't, there isn't anything other than recommending other persons that I can think of.
great.
Would you agree with that, Dave and Dom?
What was that? I did. What was that
Got a
last?
comment, Dom?
Oh, any comment? No, except that I'm not a lawyer, but a pilot agreement sounds just like a contract to me. And so you just have to make sure you got all the clauses that cover. So basically, people don't take the technology, I guess.
Yeah,
Molly's better at that than she teaches contracts at engineering school.
Oh, yeah, and the other thing is, even though you have your application in and you say this is patent pending technology, you have to have poison pill clauses so that the person with the deeper pockets, like Wegmans, doesn't win just because
Yeah.
they wait you out. So you're well aware of the risk reward. So
yeah. Okay.
I didn't want to bring up litigation, but there it is.
The L word.
The L word, yes. We have a colleague who is a litigator, and it's considerable. So
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, your technology is really interesting. It'll be
Thank you. Thank you.
so the pilot is partly for you to help work out, hopefully, very few bugs, but that's part of why you're doing this, at least initially.
Yeah, I mean, well, a lot of it is because it's not a refrigeration unit that's a little bit more efficient than the other refrigeration unit that you can stick in the refrigeration unit hole of a device. It's a different thing. So, and it also sounds a little bit like free energy or something. So I think the biggest hurdle for us is just showing that it's real. We have a lot of testing in-house and like like testing on boxes and things like that. But putting it with a customer in their environment and they know their equipment and showing that it does what we say it does is, I think, everything. I mean, it's what's keeping investors from investing when they're hesitant. It's keeping customers from buying when they're hesitant. I mean, that is the thing. It's so and even competitions, like we make it to the last rung of all these competitions, and then the feedback is always like, well, we want to see it working in a customer environment. And I like, okay, all right, so that's what we got to do.
Yeah.
So we finally got that SBIR funding that allowed us to scale up to large enough format. that we could do that. Before that, it would be like, taking 1-inch strips and trying to cover a refrigerated trailer that's 53 feet long. It didn't work. So yeah, so now we're able to do that, and I think that's going to open a lot of doors for us. But in the
Well,
meantime,
you're exactly right, because now this is testing at scale with a fleet.
yeah,
With, how long do the trailers, stay outside? How long are they exposed? What's the risk? I mean, I can't imagine the value of a tractor trailer load of perishable goods.
yeah,
And it's great that, Wegmans sustainability efforts are
mhm,
to give you a chance to test that and put that at risk. So there's something in it for both parties, and hopefully they'll keep that, spirit, but it's always good to have it in writing to make sure everybody's aligned and stays aligned, because sometimes, in a corporate environment like Wegmans, and I've been to 1500 Brooks Ave, people change and new players come in all the time. So that paperwork is what, binds you together.
yeah,
Each do your part. So you're wise to do that.
yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the Wegmans conversation, because it's a local company and it's sort of like an earlier conversation, we didn't really start off the conversation with like, we need to nail down the metrics of a successful pilot. We need to, what happens when there's all of those things that we're doing now with the more recent conversations. And so on the one hand, it's valid. I mean, it's useful for us just to get the data, even if it doesn't result in a sale or any of that. But of course, it would be better if it did, right? But they, I think, regardless of the agreement, I mean, I would like to get an agreement with them in place now, but regardless of that, they have already told us that, so they're getting their new trailers, they're paying extra to get this like a reflective white painted trailers on the top, and that's why. And I know that we can do significantly better than white paint. So what they told us without me asking was, if we find something better, then we'd go with that. So I think in the end, if it's in their best interest, they're gonna want to do it. So, but yeah, I mean, otherwise just protecting the IP and all of that. They're not in the business of making thin film, so I'm less worried about that with a company like Wegmans, but some of the companies that we do, we have had conversations with are potentially, manufacturing materials themselves, and then I get like, well, I'm not sure I want to tell you all of the process, and things like that.
And if they are in that business, they may even, sometimes you have to think about, will there be subsequent improvements? And if so, who will own those? If you
Yeah.
are working together kind of to discuss these things.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's good to be sure that everything gets assigned, or, that it's retained by you.
Yeah, I recently heard, actually just yesterday, so I think I mentioned we might have this pilot with Con Ed in Texas. But there were a few other people that I spoke, like 3 different people that I spoke with yesterday that had Con Ed pilots that they were either negotiating or were in mid swing with, and we're having issues with them. And one of them was, and you guys will like this, being where you are, they put a bunch of things in their pilot agreements, like any IP that's developed during the pilot they own. And it's funny because what these people were saying was that if they put all things like that in there, and that if somebody argues it, then they're like, okay, fine, we'll take it out. But they always put it in there just to see if they can get it, and then yeah, and just like that's really sneaky. So you basically they're preying on the companies that either don't have the resources to get good representation early on, or it's an oversight or things like that.
Being on the uninitiated to make sure you read the contract thoroughly.
Yeah, exactly.
And there may be some collaborations where you actually want someone to test it out that does know more about it in a certain aspect.
Mhm.
So it could be a condition of somebody, conducting the pilot, if in fact they did have something to offer that you wanted. So yeah, I
Yeah.
can see why they put it in as a standard clause.
Yeah.
And you probably want that in, you definitely want that in, is what you're
Yeah.
saying. And then is it gonna be, will there be insurance? Are you purchasing insurance, and any damage would be limited to that insurance?
Well, that's one of the things that's coming up. It hasn't come up with much with the refrigerated trailer people. I think they're less concerned than I thought they might be. I mean, I was really putting a lot of work into adhesive methods and application methods that were non-destructive, like it wouldn't take the paint off and things like that. Since I've started talking to them in more detail about what we're going to do and what we're planning on doing, they're much less concerned about it than I am. They're like, just drill a hole in it. We'll plug it later. It doesn't matter. I'm like, oh, okay. But for the solar people, that really is a big concern, I think. And so we're going to have to cross that bridge with them. And I don't really know. It's, for a facility that has, I don't know, like a big solar facility, we obviously don't have the resources to guarantee that everything is, that it won't affect everything. But it's almost impossible to affect anything because we're just putting something on top. So we're not like integrating, into the system or anything like that. So yeah, I think either they're going to have to talk to their manufacturers about what the warranties are covering and what affects their warranties. But otherwise, I think, I don't know. I think all we can do is just, test the application on maybe like if it's glass that's on top of the solar panel. What I don't know is if it's just glass or if it's some kind of coating that might be more, it might have some other interaction or something like that that we don't know about. But if it's just glass, or and we can obviously just test on glass and then measure if it makes any difference on the glass at all. After we remove it. But if it, in other words, I think the only thing we could do is just test it. I don't know.
Does the SBIR allows you to make the thin film that's big enough for a tractor trailer? Will you also be able to do just general testing of a tractor trailer full of ice or something that's not, that doesn't have a value to it?
Yeah. But they have what we're going to test with Wegmans is they have a bunch of frozen bread. So I think and what's going to happen with that is it's very low risk for trailers because it's not replacing the air conditioning unit. It's just reducing the load on the existing system. So, all of the same systems are there, keeping it at temperature that it normally would. It just has to run less.
Ah, okay.
But
yeah.
for a solar panel, it's, they're more concerned with, for example, if you put something on the top that maybe, I don't know, etched the surface or something, or it left a residue on the surface, it might affect how much of the light gets absorbed by the solar absorber. So I think that's, the main reason why it's more of a concern for them than it is for trailers. Really, I just don't know how to address it really. I mean, obviously I can't replace a, 50 megawatt facility or anything, you know what I mean? But yeah, I think the risk is really low. I mean, just doing some tests that maybe prove that risk is low with, before putting it on the actual solar panels, hopefully that's enough. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Have you guys ever talked to anybody who's working on something like that, like a something that would go on a solar panel or?
I'm trying to think, and
I know of.
I don't think so, actually.
Not that we can talk about.
I could tell
But
you.
even identifying, yeah. Well, are there any other questions or have any of the folks from Binghamton worked out arrangements where you're doing pilot testing and nobody's really sure of the effect one thing will have on another? And any other suggestions for ways to manage that risk? Or Steve, you might have seen some of that, I don't know.
I'm not
It's-
aware of any other situations, but I don't work with the companies on a day-to-day basis.
Uh,
I'm
and
on, Steve.
honestly, I'm sorry, who's?
Steve?
Yeah, Steve, I was just going to chime in. I was going to say, oftentimes we'll see kind of materials sharing agreements or material transfer agreements in the context of, material characterization, testing, evaluation. And, oftentimes similarly, there's patent application already filed. It's especially important when you don't have a patent application, because then you're really relying on, that contract and that party to honor that contract.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're in a much better position having that.
Yeah,
Filed.
but with pilots, yeah, I'm, and I heard Rami say that she's not interested to license, but sometimes you can structure it, just a ton of different ways. You could give them some kind of limited batch manufacturing capability, but again, you're absolutely right to be concerned when you're dealing with a party that has the ability to manufacture your novel material. You're also potentially concerned that they might figure out a way to work around your patent. And so I think that requires a careful look at the claims. If you have anything granted, that's what would really be capable of protection. And then if it's only pending, you're just uncertain as to what the ultimate claims will be, given the back and forth with an examiner during the examination process. So when you don't have those claims crystallized, it's again, it's just really important to be careful, because ideally you're going to wind up with something that reads directly on what you're doing, but sometimes through the patent prosecution process, your claims can get narrowed to the extent that it might be able to prevent someone from doing a process really similar to what you're doing, but you weren't actually able or make a material very similar to what you're making, but sometimes the way the patent churn goes, you're not able to get claims directly on what your specific, you know, practice, technology, and or business model require. Where are you in the patent process?
So we just, I'm trying to remember the date that we filed USPTO. Obviously, we filed that first, and then all the international stuff last year. So we're following through on all of that.
When you say all the international stuff, you mean going from, sounds like a US provisional maybe to a PCT international patent application, or have you actually entered specific countries' national phase under PCT?
We've entered specific countries. So we
Okay.
filed for 11 different countries.
Terrific.
It's pretty expensive for, you know, a
Indeed.
person like myself to cover.
Have you, absolutely. Have you had any patent office communications? Have you gotten any kind of sense as to whether your claims, you know, in terms of just the examiner's perspective on evaluation of your claims?
No, not yet.
Okay,
You know, still waiting to hear back.
gotcha. Yep.
But yeah, so there was something that you were saying, maybe I was thinking about something else. Let's see if I remember. Oh, what I was going to say is with the whole licensing thing, also there's this is something I've talked with a lot of people about, and you know, I know a lot of people, especially, you know, technical types like myself, are, you know, tend to prefer to do that licensing thing so that they don't have to deal with all the business issues around, you know, developing a business. But with this, one of the places where, I mean, the what's really beneficial about this is that it's very inexpensive to manufacture. So we get a lot of benefit financially by selling the materials ourselves, because we can make it inexpensively, but it creates a lot of value for customers. So giving that to someone else for a licensing fee, I don't know. It just seems like,
What's your plan for scale up? Will you engage in any contract manufacturer or?
yeah, that's what we're doing right now. So we
Okay.
have, you know, basically the materials are designed for high throughput manufacturing. So it's actually harder to make at smaller scale than it is at larger scale. The problem has been, though, to get in the door with, you know, to get high throughput manufacturers that will do a small run, because they have to stop, you know, their money making on their you know,
Absolutely.
right. So, but then I finally hired a manufacturing consultant who's got all the connections and, you know, speaks their language and all of that. And that's really, you know, made all of that happen. So at this point, I mean, you know, with the, you know, inevitable hiccups with different things, you know, so one person's equipment goes down or whatever, you know, and there's different issues like that, or you know, raw materials coming from one source we have to find from another source or something like that. But for the most part, it's at this point, it's really just turning the knob. You know, we, instead of doing a minimum half-day run on, you know, the extruder, we would do, you know, a few days to do a lot of materials, that kind of thing. So yeah, at this point, it's like, it doesn't really make sense to hand that over to someone else for them to get the, you know, 85% gross margins on it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's also, I mean, there's the IP protection, right? And just, you know, not making it easy for people to reverse engineer or figure out ways around the IP, that sort of thing. But but also just, I think it makes business sense otherwise. Yeah.
Certainly. And do you have any kind of exclusivity arrangement with the contract manufacturer you're working with now? Are they prepared to, scale with you globally? Or might it make sense to work with several different contract manufacturers?
We are working with several different ones.
Okay.
Um,
And do you have any structure to that? Are they manufacturing for specific applications for you, for any specific geographic territories? How are you approaching that?
No, not really. We just tell them how much we need, and it's all like on a purchase order invoicing basis. And I think once we start with like regular sales, then we can, nail down some more, well, first of all, even lower costs. So, instead of, if we're running their equipment for longer, then we should be able to get it for less expensive per hour. But also, yeah, some of those things that you're talking about, as far as like, maybe it makes sense to have, I don't know, some
How-
contract
how-
manufacturers that are elsewhere that are servicing that market, or
How does the process go? They make the material, they send it back to you, and you have a team that outfits whatever, truck or other vehicle or whatever
Yeah.
container it is.
right now that's how it's working. So it goes from, raw materials get sent to the sifting, classifying, then it goes to the compounder, extruder, vapor deposition. Those are all at different places. So then it gets, right now it's being sent to us, but at some point it's being sent to us because we are conducting these pilots, and we are helping install the materials and things like that. But in the end, it will be we won't be doing the installations. It will be the like maintenance people at the companies where we're doing the installation. So it'll be like, either we train those people, have a training session with them on how to install it, or just a video. But it's we're designing it to be very simple to install.
And then are your pending patent claims directed to the material itself, to the integration of that into a larger vehicle, to the process of applying it to a refrigerated vehicle? Anything anything specific there?
Yeah, basically all of that. And also we have a high capacity system that's the sort of the long-term vision for heat inverse. So we have these thin films that they're very low barrier to entry for people to try and integrate. So it can be an aftermarket add-on, that kind of thing. But we have a high capacity system that's more like it's not just a thin film, it's like a cube that can do on the order of about 1,000 watts per square meter of cooling, and not just the 100 watts per square meter cooling that we get
Wow.
from the thin films. And then
More of an integrated system?
yeah, exactly, precisely. So, but that's a harder, with a totally new
Sure.
technology, it's harder to get that kind of integration buy-in from people. So we're starting with the thin films. There'll be a lot of places where the thin films are as far as you're going to go, but then there's going to be other places where we'll integrate it into the manufacturing of, like, say, a reefer, and fit it out with
Yeah.
the whole cooling.
Yeah, exactly. So it's at some point there, you may be partnering directly with the vehicle manufacturers themselves.
Right, exactly.
I guess just given that kind of landscape for your portfolio, the one thing I would say, and as an attorney, I just, need to give my caveat. This isn't legal advice or anything, but the one thing I would say is, with respect to the contract manufacturing, it sounds like there are different parts of the process to make the material occurring at different locations. So it doesn't sound like those individual kind of participants would, or vendors would need IP rights from you, although there may be, maybe that final formation or production of the material. If the claim covers the material itself and you have a contract manufacturer doing that for you, there's probably some sort of implied license in your transaction, but you might also just want to, in your contracts, have that all spelled out so that, it's very clear that they have the right to make it. So they're not, unsettled, that they're comfortable with that whole situation. And if those aren't in place and they're comfortable anyway, maybe you don't need to change things, but it could give you some additional levers to have it all just really spelled out. For anyone in the manufacturing process, say then on vehicles integration and the maintenance folks who would be applying, if they're going to be practicing the method of applying the material to a reefer van or something that's really claimed in one of your patents that's ultimately granted, they may, they may need to have those licensing rights from you or some other transfer of those IP rights, just to make sure it's all above board, so not like out licensing the entire business model and giving someone else, the 85% margins, but just making sure that, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed with respect to, scoping everyone's permissible use of the IP where it's necessary.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Yeah, that's not something that was on my radar. That's good information.
Cheers.
Thank
Amali, I feel like I've been rambling a little bit. I'll turn it back over.
No, it's wonderful because from the Research Foundation, you see so much technology, and you have the added benefit of licensing it out or selling it, or working with people that actually transferring it, which is a great perspective to have. We've always loved it when we have the opportunity to work with you guys. And we see we have a few with the Medical Device Innovation Challenge, a few from SUNY. And now that Chris Nomura left ESF, we don't see as much there. And of course, we love Binghamton, and they work directly with you or through Pear. You're kind of partners, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It'll be good to be back out and able to go to different events again and see people. And
I can't wait.
I think Albany's done a pretty good job trying to keep everybody talking for this last year and a half. And I think, Carly, do you remember, there's event still in the fall, or did they push it up to the spring of 22?
No, right now the NYSTAR event, I'm assuming you're talking about, believe it's the end of November, sometime in November. Still on the calendar that I saw, at least.
That's the one at the Turning Stone?
I believe so. I know before COVID it was, so I'm guessing they're probably going back there again.
Any other questions come up? We haven't gotten a lot. We've been transitioning from wrapping up our spring projects and our students graduating. We're bringing on 10 students this summer, which is more than we've ever had before. So it should be interesting and busy, and should generate a lot of questions that then we can discuss at least some of them here at these meetings. So, and Scott, I don't know if you heard me when we have 2 potential speakers on the Oracle, the Google v. Oracle but neither one of them could do it today. So we're a little
Okay.
disappointed about that, but hopefully next month.
We're gonna
How about
keep
the
you stringing along, Scott.
How about the trade secret question? You know, the fact, gave you the fact pattern there, and how would the law apply under a misappropriation scenario?
Once it's out, it's out. And I mean, that's why there's litigation, prove the damages and all the lost income that came as a result of losing that trade secret. But I mean, I don't know of any way you can preserve it once it's out.
You can't put the genie back in the bottle. You can't get a mulligan or say, hey, we did everything we could. We were a victim of this crime. And
I think that's the proof that goes into getting your damages.
All the things that you did to mitigate the risk. But Dom tells a story of, taking a tour with the company president, and there was a Post-it note with a formula. Am I getting it pretty much right? So as, there were probably lots of procedures, but don't give tours with sticky squares visible.
The formulas, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he gave it away. But doesn't that fall under just common law? I mean, just someone steals it. It's like stealing anything,
Any other property, right?
right? So you have to lock up your property, you have to lock up your trade secrets, and if somebody breaks in and steals it, you can go after
Yeah,
them.
one of the things you have to substantiate in a trade secret litigation is that your controls were commensurate with the value of the trade secret. So if you have a $10 billion trade secret, but anyone can just walk in and look at it, like that formula, who knows? At that point, your controls probably weren't commensurate with the value.
Right, at the very least, you would have wanted you to have to sign an agreement that said anything you see you won't disclose or something, and they didn't ask you to do that.
Yeah, actually, the presidents of companies are the worst. Because at Welch Allyn, the president would take people around and show them things that he shouldn't because he was proud of it. And the same with General Electric. This was the president of Cleveland Lighting, and he was proud of his facility, but he didn't realize what was in there. He didn't realize things were written down that someone could just look at. So usually you say marketing people are the problem, but sometimes.
Well, hang on here. I have to defend somewhat. Go back to the contract manufacturing that Steve brought up. I've been in maquiladoras where you actually go down the hall and various departments have actually window shades. So you see what's going on in various parts, and they basically lead you to where your goods are being manufactured and you see nothing else but your goods in a hallway. So some of the contract manufacturers are probably much better than company presidents, I suppose.
Right, because they're signing those agreements with every client that they want.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they raise and lower the shades based on who's going to be on site that day. So
well, let me turn it on you. This is good thread. So say, this is one of my bugaboo things. Say universities, a company wants to scope out a potential collaboration with the university. Okay. Or go write a proposal together. Okay. So, and parties want to enter a non-disclosure agreement for that purpose. So I like to actually say, hey, this is a definition of confidential or proprietary information. And I actually say expressly, either expressly excludes trade secret information as, defined in the Defend Trade Secrets Act or wherever, or I say, if you are going to provide trade secret information, you have to extra identify it or whatever, so that we can take proper additional steps or whatever. Right. And I mean, actually, we don't want their trade secret unless it's really necessary for the purpose. But So sometimes companies, right, they, it's a burden on them to properly identify the information, because you can have the sort of the wiggle room, or, confidential information, or the recipient would have reasonably and should have known it was confidential given the circumstances or whatever. But I don't want that. I don't want that sort of out clause. I want, if you're going to send us trade secret, maybe you don't have to mark the other confidential information, but trade secret, you do need to expressly mark it in the margins or however, let us know. And I feel like that's reasonable. Like, I feel like, let's all be clear. It's also for your benefit, company, because, as Molly said, once the genie's out of the bottle, even inadvertently by our fault on our end, it's lost to you. So aren't we in this together? And you want to safeguard that, well, trade secret information, right? But companies don't like that burden sometimes to market properly. When I say properly, I'm just sort of if you have feedback as to
So,
what's a
so the
reasonable.
question is that a reasonable request?
Yeah,
Ask them, just as they would mark confidential information confidential, so that you have the duty to keep that with them. Extra or the same marking responsibility for trade secret information.
Yeah.
And why are they reluctant to have that equal marking? Because it's a shared burden?
yeah. I mean, right,
they
in
want to-
practice, yeah.
Do they
What
want you to keep
happens?
everything confidential? Is that it?
But you could have different graduations. Sometimes we do have a marking requirement for across the board confidential information, but what is defined as confidential sometimes includes a laundry list that can say trade secret. And sometimes we try to take out the trade secret aspect, or we say you have to either mark all of yours, or you don't have to mark the regular quote confidential information, but if it's a trade secret, you do have to mark it.
At Welch Allyn, we marked everything that was a trade secret.
Sure, that would be a way to handle it, right? Mark everything, so you're
So everyone knows this is part of the trade secret.
Yeah, and that's the same with a contract manufacturer. I mean, wouldn't they, you just treat everything, because you don't want to get into, well, this didn't have a stamp on it.
Well, yeah, sure. From their perspective, right? Anything they send us, then they would be afforded this protection. What I'm saying is, look, company, if it really is a trade secret, you should know that before you give it to us, so that then you're taking the proper measures under the law, and then we can reinforce that. So I just don't know how courts would look at it and say, hey, us as a recipient party, Binghamton, we should have known or should have understood it was, or it's confidential at least, and we have to meet our obligations. So, but what I'm saying is, sure, but if it's really a trade secret, as Molly said, and then a student inadvertently says it or publishes it or puts it in a dissertation, then what? It's too late. It's the harm is done.
Yeah, I think that's why you just want to treat everything that way, because it just works better. I mean, there's always the exclusion. If it's already out there, then you don't have the obligation anyway. So if the student does inadvertently do it and they come and say, oh, you disclosed our trade secret, but then you find, well, the student at this other university already wrote it, or somebody else already wrote it, then you have that defense. But better to just take universal precautions. I mean, that's kind of how we are. We make all our students sign NDAs, all of us sign, we want to err on the side of overprotectiveness, because that way we're always able to say, this is our system, this is how we do things, this is how we can assure you, that it was
Right.
not.
It's manage the risk. What I'm saying is, look, if you're dealing with a university, almost by nature, there's more risk to you, right, of inadvertent leaks. So do you really need to send us your trade secret information? We want the company to manage it consciously, what they're sending. and
Okay,
not rely on a very thin piece of paper. If it really is a trade secret, that won't help. That would not be sufficient.
okay. And that they may very well not even need to send it. And you don't want to be dealing with someone that doesn't know the difference. That's what you're saying.
That's what I was starting to say. In practice, right? Of course, the attorneys draw up the NDAs, but hopefully they're reviewing them before they're signed. But what happens is it's the engineer or whatever on the ground or the manager project. They don't really engage to that level of detail. They don't really know what that really means and what their obligation would be. And frankly, we've never had a case. So we've never actually had a case that went to court and there were damages established, all that. It's a boogeyman scenario. What would happen? I guess sort of prompted by Romy's, what she was talking about, a pilot or a contract manufacturer. What do you really do to protect yourself, really? And there's nothing 100%. You have to have probably multiple layers of protection. So,
Yeah. Or get a lot of window shades.
yeah.
That's what Dave said. Well, it's 1 o'clock, you guys.
All right.
Thank you all for joining. And,
All right.
hope
Thank
to
you.
see
Thank you,
next
Molly.
month.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.